10 Steps Further is a podcast designed to help you get 10 steps further along your spiritual journey. If you've been on your journey for 30 years or 30 minutes, if you believe in God, or even if you're not sure He exists, all we're trying to do is help you get 10 steps further. I'm Jonathan, and this is Jack, and we're just taking a walk. Why don't you join us?
Welcome back to 10 Steps Further. We have the voice of all women. The voice of all women.
Are we going to shorten it?
The voice of all.
The voice of all.
Lesley Hyatt is with us, and Jack is here as usual. How are you?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. That's a funny question these days, right?
Yeah.
It depends on the minute, the hour, the day. You never know what you're going to get.
That's true. You know what I'm finding weird in this season is like if you feel at all like you have to clear your throat or cough for any reason. Have you been in public and you've had to sneeze?
Oh man, worse.
Yeah.
Worse. So we bought a car this summer.
Okay.
We bought a Honda Fit, and we went to the dealership, and for whatever reason, I had this tingly, dry cough that I'm like, my eyes are watering because I'm trying to hold it in. I got to go up and get a drink out of the drinking fountain. Can't hold it in, so I'm walking through the dealership just basically dry coughing the whole time, which is the symptom. Like, and so yeah, that was. I'm like, and then when we drove the car, when we looked at the car, nothing. When we left, nothing. It was only for that 45-minute window of filling out the paperwork, and it was just kept coming back. I'm like, just give me another bottle of water. Man.
I remember we canceled a podcast because you were sneezing.
Yes. Yeah.
I've been sneezing a lot, and I was the paranoid one in that spot.
Well, that was also like, it's funny. I was talking to somebody this week about COVID. And how
That's weird. I never talk about COVID.
Well, and how like week one, month 1, month 2, like I think we were all just more cautious. And when you're 8 months into something that you're like, I've seen no evidence outside of a screen that this thing even exists, it's just a little bit more like, at least somebody please get sick so I know it's actually there.
Oh, I don't know.
I know.
We have to be very careful of this podcast because we've been in this room for 45 minutes and we have been on every single rabbit trail. Every rabbit trail.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
I actually just talked to one of my really good
superpower.
Friends from college yesterday. We were texting back and forth because I got her Christmas card in the mail. And she's like, she lives in Pennsylvania, and she's like, oh my gosh, Lesley, it's crazy here. Have you got it? She said, I know so many people who got it. She's like, I got it and gave it to all my family, and I gave it to all my siblings. And so she said it was pretty mild, but she said the taste makes you go crazy. She lost her taste for like 3 or 4 weeks. And she said, by the second week, you're like, this is obnoxious to not be able to taste my food.
It's just the weirdest thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me read you a verse.
Okay.
Here we go.
We're doing this, and it's, December. It's like early December, but it probably won't come out till January, right?
Yeah, right. Like right now, I should be in Hawaii if everything works well. As you are listening, I should be
2 weeks in Hawaii with just his wife.
I should be celebrating my 20th wedding anniversary almost at my 21st wedding anniversary.
Right.
That should be happening as you're listening.
Don't pity him too much. We're still waiting to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary, and we've been married 33 years.
Right.
So maybe by 34 we will get in that 30th wedding anniversary. All right, here's the verse. The Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel. This is hundreds of years before Jesus was born.
Right.
It's a really crazy statement for a lot of reasons. You know, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. It's interesting to me that this is written in the book that Jewish people hold on to as their truth.
Right.
But it points to Jesus. Like, how could it not point to Jesus? And it's predicted. God calls his shot. The virgin's going to have a son.
Yeah.
But they don't call him Jesus. They call him Emmanuel.
Right.
Which means
God with us.
God with us. And I think that's kind of significant and key to all aspects of our life, right?
Of God being with his people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for one, this Christmas season that is now January, we celebrate that God came down. I'm writing my message right now on the miracle of the manger. That God, he decided that instead of being far off, he would come down.
Right.
But that's not the end of the with us
Right.
part, right?
Or the beginning. In a
Right.
sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
he's always been with like Moses going into the wilderness,
Sure.
as
yeah.
I think we're
Yeah.
going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But that Moses is like, if you're not with me, I'm not going. So yeah. So
Yeah.
carry on. I cut you off.
No, you didn't. You didn't. That's my
You
job.
didn't. You kept on track
Yeah.
though, so that's a win. We call that a win.
Let's keep our roles clear. All right. Jonathan gets us off track.
Yeah.
I cut him off. All right.
Yeah.
So we're today talking about God is with us in the wilderness, and I guess maybe the reason why we're talking about this is it feels very wilderness right now. You know, in the wilderness, you just look throughout the Bible. Wilderness is loneliness. Wilderness is
Waiting.
Yeah.
wilderness is temptation. You know, those are all the wilderness kinds of
So
things.
many ways it's boring, but it's like, and the only way to keep moving in the wilderness is to have hope for promise, right? For have the next, like, or else you'll die.
Right.
Yeah.
Wilderness will take you out if you're not looking forward and moving where you're supposed to be going.
Yeah, that's the whole Old Testament, right? People of Israel can't enter the promised land because as they're wandering in the wilderness, they lose faith.
Right.
They don't have the courage and passion. So how do you get to the place where you have courage and passion in a wilderness time? Just any kind of wilderness that you might be enduring, say, a massive pandemic that seems like it will never end.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah. What do you got, Lesley?
I don't know. I don't know all my wisdom. I do know that it's just hard. Like
Right.
waiting is hard. And for somebody who does like a lot of non-productive thinking, it's really hard, you know? And I think some people are more susceptible to others than others, but just this idea of like it's boring, like you're saying, but when you're bored, that's all consuming of your thoughts or whatever that's hard in that season, right?
It certainly takes some discipline. I've had to discipline myself. I have to really lean into my gratitude these days. I have to really lean into the story I'm telling myself these days, because when you do get in that, I was, quarantined for 14 days. When you get to that place where you're separate, your mind can race in those areas, and you can think more about your critic.
Yeah.
Or think more about maybe this isn't as you're a little bit of a failure in the more of those types of things. I want you, Jonathan, to tell your snow in Spokane story that you told at church on Sunday, because I think it really resonated with me.
Really? Yeah. It's San Diego is very different than where I'm from in Spokane, Washington. I think we have listeners, or those are probably our two major places of listeners.
Right.
So, and people in Spokane understand the concept of long winter. And long winter, like the first snow is actually kind of nice unless it comes before October, usually around Halloween. Like it's people are, if it comes in September, people are angry, but that first snow is, especially if it sticks, it's not just flakes, it's on the ground. It's pretty. And it doesn't stay pretty for very long. So that first snow is pretty cool. You're tolerating it in January and February, and then it better be gone by March. Like that's it. Better be, and it's not always gone by March.
That's horrible.
And so if it snows in April and sticks, the amount of anger that will rise up in people. I think we've seen snowflakes as long as June.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like, I mean, that's like record. That's like, oh, snowflakes, came down in June. But it's like you're scraping your windows and are you kidding me that this is not over yet? And just the level. I had a boss that would go to, he would find a tropical place to go snorkeling every year, or scuba diving every year in February. And if he missed it, and one year he missed it, the kind of like depression and irritation that he experienced in life. And that's the wilderness, right? The long winter. And I think you have to just keep believing summer's coming. Spring's coming. It's going to end. And it's depressing. The worst ever is the East Coast has their winters start later and end later. So we moved in November to Maine one year, and it's gearing up. February's gone. You're like just looking forward to March. March 1st was the biggest blizzard I've ever seen in my life. We got 2 feet in one day. As soon as we could clear the roads, we packed our car and moved away that day. I'm not even kidding. It was like literally, there was more to the story. Like we were already geared up, but we moved away. I mean, it was a blizzard. It's like, this is March. I'm out of here.
This shouldn't be happening.
I got a couple wilderness quotes, all right?
Okay.
I won't sugarcoat this. Standing on the precipice of the wilderness is bone-chilling. This is Jen Hatmaker, by the way. Lesley's a fan. Going alone feels so terrifying as to keep most of us distanced from the wilderness our whole lives. I'm convinced that discomfort is the great deterrent of our generation. The wilderness is where all the creatives and prophets and system buckers and risk takers have always lived, and it is stunningly vibrant. The walk out there is hard, but the authenticity out there is life. Feels like you might like that quote, Jonathan.
I do like that quote. Yeah. It's kind of boiled down to just doing hard stuff, though, right? Like it's like the creative,
Right.
like the creative process is a sense of wilderness.
Yeah.
Like nothing exists that you don't make, in a sense. Like you have to put in the effort.
You have put yourself out there, okay? Charles Lindbergh, another quote on wilderness. In wilderness, I sense the miracle of life, and behind it, our scientific accomplishments fade to trivia. All right, my favorite. Say it with me. Who is this?
Jack Hawkins.
No. I do like quoting myself.
Brene Brown.
Thank you. The wilderness can often feel unholy because we can't control it. Or what people think about our choice of whether to venture into that vastness or not. But it turns out to be the place of true belonging. And it's the bravest and most sacred place you will ever stand.
It's interesting because I was thinking when you guys were talking about wilderness and waiting, and after we had Peyton, I think she was like maybe right around a year old, and we were like, I think we want to have another kid. And I know there's people that have had to wait a really long time to get pregnant, but we basically had like 3 miscarriages in a row.
Wow.
Like really super duper early, but you can find out so early that you're pregnant now. But it was basically like anytime we tried, we got pregnant, and the doctor's like, so that's not really a huge problem. Like, you're probably fine. I'm not really worried about it. You had a healthy baby already, all of that. But there was a lot of waiting, and like, when is it going to be? And then you find out that you're pregnant, and you already in your head calculate. I mean, a woman does this. I don't know about a man, but you're always like already like, all right, so if this is when we got pregnant, then the baby will be due here, and then Peyton will be this much older than the baby. Like, all of that stuff, your mind goes to that. And then when that happens like 3 times in a row, and all you want is another baby for your family, and then it just fails. I told Matt my breaking moment when I was in that waiting, like there's literally nothing you can do but like wait for more days to pass. And I told Matt in that waiting, like, this isn't right anymore, because all I'm doing is wishing to get to the end of each week, because it'll be closer to when I can like take another pregnancy test. And I'm like, this isn't healthy. So I don't want to be in this spot anymore. And so then I just started praying for something totally different. And I felt like God totally put on my heart, like, so what if you can't have another kid biologically? You can adopt a kid, and you will love that kid just as much. And then I had this like total sense of peace.
That's only for the people on YouTube. Yeah. I'm kidding.
I had this like total sense of peace. And then of course we ended up getting pregnant with Lincoln not that long after. But the wilderness, when you're just waiting, it's such a bad spot when you're just wishing away the days because you don't have anything left to hope for, or you're just wishing away the days saying like, oh, well, on this day maybe it'll change, or on this day maybe my outcome will be different.
Right.
And
Okay, I feel like I need to explain myself, especially since we're on YouTube.
Yeah.
Most people know, but we walked through 4 years of waiting and
Right.
waiting and waiting
Right.
for adoption, and it's just, it's just such a hard road.
Right.
And absolutely, we love Daphne, and she just turned 18.
oh my gosh, it's so crazy.
She's gonna take her driver's test again this month, and she's such a hard worker and a great part of our family. But anyway, I just felt like I needed to, we're talking about waiting through the wilderness, and
Well, and that's the thing too.
And
is
yes,
like,
you would love it adopted just as much, but that road,
yeah.
like that
I
road that you
know.
just talked about was difficult. Our road was difficult. So many roads are difficult.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Well-
many people don't have the same outcome. Like they wait and wait and wait and wait, and then they still can never have a kid.
Well, and I think too, like if you look at the idea of wilderness, and wilderness being hard, we kind of can have this idea that, oh, then promised land must be easy. And that's not true. Like promised land is kind of another wilderness. Like there's a lot of story about the wilderness, but then you get into, I mean, in every scenario, like once they go into the land, now you got to fight the enemy, and you got to take the land. And then you got to keep the enemy out of the land. And even Jesus, like he went into the wilderness for 40 days, fasted, was tempted and all that. And we're going to talk about that. But then it's not like everything got easy afterwards. Now the crowds are against him. Now he's preaching and dividing, the religious culture. So like this, I think that maybe when we learn that the difficult is always going to be there. Because the reality is there's plenty of parents out there who didn't adopt, but they had a kid and it's hard.
Yeah, right.
Like it's,
Right.
and it's hard. It's hard. And it's a different kind of hard. It's not equal.
However you get the kid, it's hard, right?
Right.
Whatever.
And then
'Cause I
raising
just-
the kid is
I
hard.
was just with my friend John, who they're not fostering, but they brought a child into their house,
Yep.
whose mother was murdered by her father.
Yeah.
And the difference they're making in the world is immense into
Yeah.
the life of this. But you're right.
Yeah.
There's so much hard
Yeah.
to the wilderness. Here's some of the things that, of course, I'm a pastor, I have points. But one of the things you notice in wilderness is waiting.
Yeah.
There really is. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look just biblically, what I did was I looked up wilderness. I looked every passage in the Bible on wilderness.
Yeah.
And probably number one was waiting.
Yeah.
Moses kills somebody. He's sent
Yeah.
off to the wilderness.
Yeah.
How long?
40 years.
40 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then he gets the people out of Egypt, and then they want to wait to get the promised land. How many
Yeah.
years?
40 years.
40.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in Bible years. It's like 40 years.
I know.
Yeah.
In
40
real life
years.
years.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing too is those people, the whole point was you're not the right people.
Yeah,
Like you have proved that you're not the right people. So
40 years to kill them off.
to die.
Yes.
Like two guys survived it.
Yep.
And so of a certain age, right? It was a certain
Sure,
age.
right.
I think it was like if they were under like 20 something,
I don't know how
they
all
got
that worked out,
they got
but-
to go in. But yeah, but it's I don't know. I just think there's just something to this idea of embracing the difficult, because some people are really good at waiting. I am so bad at waiting. Like I just want to hit the fast forward button. Like, okay, we got to watch a Netflix series because nothing good's going to happen until COVID's over. Like that I go to that. I'll go to like I'm not all that entertained by video games, but I will like rent a game and veg out for as long as I can to fast forward if I'm in a season that has no promise.
Right.
Some people, like Asher, my son, is really good at like, and I think your son will be that way too, of just like discovering the awesome in the wilderness. Like being in the moment, looking around, like just being like, yeah, it's not where we want to be, but look at all these cool rocks we found. Look at
Yeah.
Look at this cool
So
discovery.
so some people can just make the most of the waiting time, but some of us are just so like, I want to get to the next thing.
This is what God calls us to, right? Psalm 27, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And the next line is, wait for the Lord, be strong, take heart, and wait.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Psalm 130, he gets his point across fairly clearly. I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning. And then he says it again, more than watchmen wait for the morning. And I just think that there are times that we just feel stuck in the waiting.
Right.
Right? You're waiting for your kid to find Jesus or come back to Jesus, or you're waiting, like test results. That's like the worst. Right now you're still waiting for Peyton's finger to heal, right? Right. She hurt her finger. It's the weirdest thing, right?
In August,
and it's still not fully healed yet.
Yep, it's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, my son is going to be, in January, he's going to be going on kind of a gap year mission thing for months on end. And I asked him, I'm like, so how bored are you right now? Because it's like we're counting it down. And he's like, I'm doing all right. My friends are in town right now. They're back for the holidays. But I was like, man, for me, like even just knowing, having a Hawaii plane ticket and having the countdown to it, it's like, okay, so how do we fast forward? Like, I mean, I love life, but how do we fast forward? Because I'm waiting for that moment. And
that part I love.
The waiting.
If you have like a date that is happening, I love that. Like,
because you know it's coming.
Planning a vacation is so fun.
Right.
So the planning part is so fun to me.
Really?
Because then you get to look forward to it.
Yeah.
It's more when you don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah. So like my son just took his wife away. They're living in Austin. They took him to San Antonio, and he was going to surprise her the day of.
Okay.
And I told him, just based on my experience, don't do that. Like, tell her in advance, because then she can anticipate it and look forward to it and plan for it and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I guess people are just different. But
Totally.
Yeah.
So did he wait or did you tell her?
That was like it was going on a Friday. We had talked to him on Thursday. I guess it didn't really matter at that point. But they did have a great time in San Antonio.
So
good.
Fun.
I've read this on the podcast before, but I just think this is epic. F.B. Meyer said, God has his set times. It's not for us to know them. Indeed, we can't know them. We must wait for them. If God told Abraham he must wait all those years until he pressed the promised child to his bosom, his heart would have failed him. So, in gracious love, the length of the weary years was hidden. And only as they were nearly spent, and there were only a few months to wait, God told him, according to the time of life, Sarah shall have a son. If God told you on the front end how long you would wait to find the fulfillment of your desire or pleasure or dream, you'd lose heart. You'd grow weary in well-doing, and so would I. But he doesn't. He just says, wait. I keep my word. I'm in no hurry. In the process of time, I'm developing you to be ready for the promise.
That I feel like so many people have said during this COVID season, like, man, we just had no idea. They were like 2 weeks to slow the curve, and none of us had any idea that 9 months later we'd be like the same place or worse than we were. Like nobody knew.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that so many times. Like, would it have been better if they were like, hey, by the way, you're gonna start lockdown on March 13th. And it's probably going to be about a year and a half or something, whatever it is. You know, like, would that have been better?
A decade.
I don't know if that would have been better.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have. I think it would have been way worse, right?
But,
if they said,
you know, at
here's
first,
what we're going to do. We're not going to do anything for a year and a half.
Right.
But like the 2 weeks, everyone's like, oh, this will be kind of fun. We like are going home to work.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Here we are.
It certainly is wearying. That's for sure. Okay, I have another wilderness. All right. Wilderness is a time of wandering. When you look, that's what the people of Israel did. They just wandered.
Yeah, because the distance that they traveled was not a 40-year journey distance.
Yeah.
It was like a couple of days distance. So they literally were walking around in circles in a terrible part of the world.
Right.
For 40 years.
Yeah.
Like as a nation. Like just we're just an unsettled people that walks in circles for 40 years. And waits for everybody to die. Like,
so what does that?
That's crazy.
What my question is, what does that say about God?
Oh man, the weird thing about the story is the miracles that happened during that time, maybe you could argue that they were greater than the things that happened once they got in the promised land, right? I mean, they were miraculously provided for every single day, food, because they're in a place where there's no food.
Right.
There's a giant pillar of fire at nighttime that tells them where they need to be. There's in the daytime, that fire just turns into a cloud that tells them where they need to be. They stay in one spot unless the fire or cloud goes anywhere. They drink water from a rock. Like it's a crazy journey of God is with them and providing for them. But at the same time, they're missing out on the thing he wanted to give them, but they weren't ready to take it.
Yeah.
So and it's prepared. And at the same time, as they were a failed generation to take the land, they were also the generation that I'm sure there was this echo of, as their kids are growing up, like, why are we just what is this life we're living? Why are we doing this? And it was the preparation for the next generation to go in and take the land, and they did that.
I guess in some ways I never thought of it like this, but life is not always about the destination. In fact, it's rarely about the destination.
Yeah.
It's always about the journey. And the journey for them was, hey, you got to get this. It's about God. It ain't about you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like you got to trust this God that he can do anything.
Right.
And until you do, we're not moving forward.
Right.
I think that's probably similar journey we're on.
Yeah. And here's the thing too that I've always been convinced of is that God has something for you that you may never have. That they got to the edge of the promised land and God said, go in and take the land. And they're like, no, the people are too tall. Like the enemy's too big. And so that was like, they didn't have the faith that God would give it to them. And so they never had it. And the story of Israel as God's people is a people that God offered them a lot and they got a little because of themselves not taking it.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes our wilderness is our own fault. And God's like, okay, I gave you an option. You could have had promised land or you could have had wilderness, and you chose wilderness because you were afraid to take promised land.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I do believe that God always has something more for us. But those stories get me to the place where, like, I go, what if I just did, like, one thing wrong? Like, I didn't, at the right moment, I didn't say, yeah, I'm in.
Right.
And so now I'm not going to ever get there.
Yeah, but so here's what's awesome about that, right? We talked about this. Everybody died in the wilderness except for two guys. The two guys that didn't die in the wilderness were the two guys who said, let's take the land. So even though the majority was fearful, the two that were faithful, when they rolled back around again, they got to go into the promised land.
I totally get that, but
So-
I that's not my point, because I know there are times along my journey where I wasn't the guy that was totally faithful.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if I
Right.
have to be totally faithful the whole time to get everything that God
Right.
wants, I'm hosed.
Well,
I'm
here's
not
the thing.
getting it.
I am convinced, yes, you have to be totally faithful to get everything God would give you. I also think nobody gets everything
Yeah,
God would
that's-
give them.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's true.
it's just recognizing, like, yes, we like he offers more than anybody will ever have. Like, potential is always greater than reality. But that's also kind of part of just the way my brain works. Like, I don't think of it as oh, I'm missing out, as much as I think of it as how much is there. And when
Right.
that just continues to expand, you're just like, okay, I can't get all that because it's too much. That's how much he's given. Lesley's making faces.
All right,
following.
verses. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And at the end of this chapter, the world wasn't worthy of these people. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. They were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. Kind of what you're saying. Since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. So what I guess I see this as is we're all in this 4x100 relay, and you basically live your life and you hand it off to somebody else.
Right.
But God's the only one who sees start to finish the whole story. You're just playing your role in the story.
Right. Yeah. And just, I think Americans we have this independence, and in some ways that can be good, but this idea of I'm part of something bigger kind of escapes us. You know, like I know that for me, it's always, I've been that independent, like you don't need the masses, but isn't that what society is the coming together in a group of people going in the same direction. And when you do that, then you realize, oh, part of my role is to strengthen the next guy or the next woman or the next kid to do their thing, because what we're doing, and I think in like the last American time that I feel like I've really seen, like heard of it, was like World War II, when people recognized going to women go into the factories, so the men go fight the war. They realize I'm going to do something I don't want to do so that they can do something they don't want to do, which benefits all of us. Like a community mindset that's part of that relay piece. And I feel like sometimes we miss it.
Yeah.
What do the women think?
I don't know. I mean, I think you're really spot on. I guess I'm just sitting here absorbing it. You're just speaking to me, just telling me all the things.
Okay, let's talk about this one. Wilderness is a time of loneliness.
Right? Yeah.
You know, there are times I noticed this in the life of David, because he's being hunted by Saul, and he's having to run for his life. 1 Samuel 23. David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. And I just wonder if anybody can relate to any of that. Like, is there a time you feel misunderstood and undermined, devalued? You feel misunderstood at work, or undervalued, or underappreciated, or like you do all the work at home and you're not really being noticed? Like, those can be great times of wilderness.
Right. I think I used to feel a lot more loneliness than I do now, and it's probably just because I'm an oversharer. Because really, if you talk to anybody, there's somebody who's been where you've been.
Right.
And maybe they're not in it right now, but I think sometimes that's the power of your time in the wilderness, is that when somebody else is in the wilderness, you can relate and you can help give them that hope that they will see the other side of it, for whatever it is. You know, if it's like waiting to get pregnant, or if it's like a child who's gone astray and you're waiting, hoping that they'll come back, or, you know, a long season of unemployment that you've been waiting to find a job. And so I think that the part that feels so lonely is that when you're in the wilderness, it feels like scary and hard, and sometimes you maybe don't want to talk about it. And when you don't take the time to talk about it, then you don't discover that there's other people who have been where you are and that can help support and pray and like share. I mean, the fact of knowing like, oh, I've totally experienced that same thing is so reassuring. It's so comforting to know like, oh, and you're still like a normal human. You're
Right.
like, you look like you're doing great. Like your family
Right.
from the outside seems like it's doing great, and you've been through this. Okay, I'll probably be okay. And I don't know, that might be more for me than other people, but I just am so much on human connectedness that to just be able to, I think that's one of my favorite things of why I like to be so vulnerable with like anything, or me or my relationship with Matt or our family or our dynamics or how I was brought up, because I think that's a big part of why there's so much mental health issues, is that you feel like you're alone, that you're the only person who's ever experienced it. And it's so wrong. Like, how many millions of people are there in this world? There's probably very rarely anything that you've been through that nobody else has been through.
Okay, so I'll be honest with you guys, all right? On Sunday, it was my first time back in like a really long time at church, because I was in quarantine for 2 weeks. And the week before that, I was invited by Jacques Césaire, who's one of the coaches for the Buffalo Bills, to see the greatest game of the entire football season, because his team that I was cheering for scored a touchdown with 35 seconds left to take the lead, and then the other team, the Cardinals, scored with 1 second left to defeat
Crazy.
the Bills. And if you look at the ESPN highlights, you can see my son-in-law, who's for the Cardinals, standing up, waving
my
his arms,
gosh.
and me going straight down. but I hadn't been there. And then I was there like the week before, but the week before that it rained. And so
Right.
I'd kind of gotten out of the habit, right?
Right.
Which I'm sure a lot of people are in this place where they're out of the habit of going to church.
Right.
And I tell you, man, I woke up on Sunday morning and I would have absolutely, had I not been paid to be there,
Right.
had I not actually been giving the message,
Right.
I probably would have chosen not to show up. And that whole morning was so life-giving.
Yep.
Like our natural tendency is to pull away, rest a little more, get some me time. When I'm wondering if that's what you really need right now. And there are some people I think, well, I just want to make sure that I'm safe, or I don't want to be with people because I want to protect grandma. And I just want you to do some evaluation that maybe in your spirit you would definitely not choose to be around people just because that's how you feel.
Yep.
But being with people, I mean, I can't even tell you what we talked about. And it wasn't the dynamic message that I gave on Sunday. It was that I got to hang out with people and we prayed together and we just talked about dumb stuff together. Lauren was there. Lauren Burke was there.
know,
She
I
hadn't been
heard.
there for a long time. And we're watching, and you're doing, Joby is doing the kid's story. And they had these 2 ketchup bottles, and her son Henry is stealing one of the ketchup bottles and taking it off. It was awesome.
So good.
It was great. And so that time of loneliness, if you're wandering through that, maybe it's time to step up and make some phone calls or do a walk with somebody, or, socially distance happy hour, whatever it takes.
Yeah, I think that's really true in this COVID season. And just because you're naturally not bumping into people as frequently, you don't really know. Like, you have no idea what's really happening inside of people's houses. And it's been a long time. It's not like it's just the first few weeks.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've heard of like a few divorces that have happened since, or that are going through divorces now.
Yeah.
And then if you're not able to process that with people, to communicate like, oh, this is what I'm going through, and you don't know, it feels super lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think it's like we don't really. I think there's a couple guys that I've known for a long time that, on the surface, they are the most high energy, happy people ever. These 2 guys they seem very similar to each other. They're both like athletes and super fit, and they're always happy and all this. Both of them, from separate sources, have communicated, and has been communicated to me, that they really struggle with depression. They really struggle with anger. You would never know. You would never. And here's the thing: like, when they're around people, they don't struggle with any of that.
Right.
But they need the people.
Right.
And I have some of those tendencies. Not, I don't think, where these guys are at, but it's like I am just I'm alive when I'm with people. And so there's different kind of wilderness, right? There's the wilderness with your friends in the desert waiting to die. And then there's the wilderness like Jesus going off by himself. And it's like, if angels don't come, I'm going to die. And so these are different types of wilderness. And I think that lonely aspect, like in the wilderness, you can band together with other people who are going through it with you. But some people just don't have that. And at different times. And I think we all need that, but we don't all have it.
Here's maybe a scary spot. This is my last point. And that is, as I looked up wilderness in the Bible, what happened to Jesus in the wilderness?
Tempted.
He was tempted.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
can be the hard space
Right.
where we're at. Because when we're hungry and angry and lonely and tired, that's when we're most susceptible to make our dumbest decisions. And wilderness has at least a couple of those, right? It certainly has lonely. In this season, angry is probably a common denominator for a lot of people.
Right.
When you hear what the latest thing that the governor is doing, or the latest restrictions or whatever,
Right.
I'm talking about other people. I'm not talking about me losing my temper during staff meetings.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that.
Right.
I don't know about hungry. Probably not hungry, but angry, lonely, and tired.
Right.
I mean, seriously, are we not tired of it?
Weary, yeah.
Yeah, we're not weary from this.
Yeah, it's purposeless time. I feel like is what to me how it feels. It's like when there's time without purpose. When there's time with purpose, purpose could be anything. Purpose could be hanging out with a good friend. It could be going out to dinner. It could be going to a movie. It could be, but when you have extended time without purpose, you just want it over with, and your brain and body won't let you live in that for very long. You will do something.
Right.
And that's where I think temptation comes in. Is your imagination will be like, I've got to get out of the pain of nothingness,
Right.
and that's where you're vulnerable to make some pretty bad decisions.
Right.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier, though, like during those seasons, you have to find what is the purpose of what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you get to that like hopelessness spot, like,
Right.
well, what's the point?
Yep.
It's never going to be a good place to be.
So what is it? We'll end with this. All right. What is it that this season has been doing in you? What is the purpose you're finding, Lesley?
Well,
I can go. I mean, I always have something, right? For me, the purpose has been very internal. Like I've gone inward. I've spent some good time with my counselor to deal with some things, some burdens that I've been carrying. A lot of them have to do with church and how I evaluate myself based on how many people are showing up at church or finances for church or all those kinds of things.
Right.
And so he's helped me to break that and realize that my worthiness comes from an audience of one. And if I can please him, I'm good. But if I throw anybody else in there, I mean, even my wife or my kids or whatever, if anybody else is in there or in the top spot, then I'm always susceptible to not being valuable enough in my own thinking. But when I think of God and being his kid, it doesn't matter how many people like me or don't like me, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's been for sure my wilderness.
yeah. Well, I said in the very beginning of this that I felt like God was saying, like, here's your chance, time to slow down. Like, I think that there's been a big thing in our family of figuring out, like, what we prioritize. And then out of it, having this, like, overabundance of gratitude that we have a lot of things that are hard in our family, like I have a kid with a learning disability and I'm fully homeschooling him, and we have a child who has anxiety, and it's not easy, but I just feel like it's shown us so much that we are just the luckiest people. Like we have so much to be thankful for. And no matter what disappointments come from shutting down this or shutting down this, our family is constant and it's safe, and we feel like we never will be given this time with our kids ever again, the amount of time that we've been given. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the day to day I get like bogged down in that it's heavy and it's a lot, and I can't just go do what I want to do when I want to do it. But it's just been revealed like so many times that we're just so fortunate that we're in the place that we're in and that we get this extra time together.
Right. Yeah, I think to take it a different direction, that gets the end, is it really has brought to my mind what is worth fighting for. And part of that as a Christian growing up my whole life, seeing and hearing about history and hearing about oppression and hearing about all of that, and looking at where we're at right now, and the debates on should churches be closed or open, the silencing of Christianity, the silencing of worship, the polarization, not only politically but spiritually, and really has, I feel like for me, I think real quick a story. I remember working with this kid I was working at the YMCA with kids who broke the law, and they get community service, and their punishment was they got to mow lawns and play pool with me.
Right.
Could be worse. But I had this kid, and he was just like, kind of thought he was pretty cool, and he's like just talking up, all the terrible things he's done. And I'm just trying to love him. I'm just trying to be in the background of the conversation, of just like steer him in the right direction. And he, different than most kids for whatever reason, I think I might have been tired and hungry or something, but I kind of snapped on him a little bit. And he's like, wait, you've never, and he started kind of listing some of the stuff he did. And I was like, no. And he's like, why not? And I said, 'cause I'm not stupid. And I just kind of like silenced him because I thought beyond the moment. And here's what's crazy. That was the most effective 10, 15 minutes of my entire encounter with this guy, was actually just being at the end of dancing and just communicating. And I feel like this season is doing that with a lot of people, where it's the people who are kind of coming to life are the people who are getting tired of the dance. And I feel like in a wilderness time, there's something to that, of just like, how far are you going to let them push you? How far are you going to let it go? And especially spiritually, you're seeing this divide. You're seeing the people who say, you know what, church isn't worth it right now. And you see this other group that says, you know what, if we all die, we're still going to church. And like, that was never a conversation a year ago.
Right.
And I think, like, in all of history and all of Christianity, I think the most powerful season for any work of God has always been when the people say, I will die, but I will still do this.
There's a feeling I get a little bit when you look forward to, hey, okay, let's say everybody gets a vaccine and whatever. What's it going to look like? And some people will go, well, it'll be the same. Most people say it won't. It'll look different. Right. It'll never be the same. Then there's all the real panicky people that'll go, church will never be the same. We have to totally redo it. Right. And I kind of mixed in there, feeling like maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't. Who knows? Who knows what it'll be? Probably will mean less people. Yeah. At least, certainly initially. It'll take a while to get people coming back or whatever. Right. The only thing that the biggest hope that I have is, you're not going to stop Jesus. Right. Like, you're not going to go and go, look, man, I finally realized going to church and having God in my life was a waste of time. Right. And I'm going to be so much better off. I'm just warning you, if you're listening and feeling that way, God will get your attention. Right. And you will not like the way that turns out for you. Right. I am absolutely, positively, 100% convinced. So I don't need to stand up and say, hey, what a loser you are. Why aren't you showing up to church? Why do I see you on Facebook at the beach and you can't ever go to church, Like, we're meeting outside, it's the same weather. I know. I don't need to, because I believe with all my heart that God will show the truth is truth. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, I feel like we are right now at the edge of the promised land. And are we going to fight? Are we going to go in? Are we going to take the land that's being offered to us? Because right now, here's what's weird. Like, most churches have lost a lot of people during the season. Some churches are packed out bigger than they've ever been. That's interesting to me. I do think there's a movement. The question is, are you in it? So, like, I feel like the wilderness brings that to you. Yeah. And so, like, that for me, that's what it's doing. I don't know. I just sort of feel like we just wandered around for the last 45 minutes. Yeah. Appropriately so. I've considered starting a second podcast called Rabbit Trails with Jonathan.
Yeah,
or
seriously.
Chasing Rabbits. Thank you guys for being on this extra long episode of 10 Steps Further. Anything else? That's it. We'll see you next time. All right. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for these last 10 steps. If you'd like to join us for another journey, or if you know someone else who's on this walk, subscribe to our podcast at 10 Steps Further on iTunes, or simply search 10 Steps Further on your podcast app. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation with a question or a comment or a criticism or even a wisecrack, look us up on Facebook. We've created a Facebook group where you can be part of the conversation. We'll see you next time.